this back and forth between Trump and DeSantis, it keeps going on. During today, both of their stops, they're going back and forth, attacking each other. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and I should note, based on what Andrew just reported there just a few moments ago, the Trump campaign sent out a link to his article, basically flagging those comments that he found that DeSantis made about Fauci in the past. But it is in Iowa, which is the latest stage, where they have been trading these insults, I should note, to one another. You're really seeing DeSantis, who for months kind of absorbed a lot of the insults coming his way from the former president, is now counterpunching, using one of Trump's favorite words. Trump himself is in Des Moines today, Jake. He also was going after DeSantis several times, talking about the disparity in their polling, how far ahead he is of Governor DeSantis when you look at the average of those polls right now nationwide, but also talking about Iowa specifically, with the former president saying that he believes there's no way that they could lose Iowa. Obviously, it would be incredibly devastating if he did, given he's the former president and the Republican frontrunner at this time. He also, Jake, went after DeSantis for those comments he made recently, basically arguing that if Trump was reelected, he'd only have one more term in office, while DeSantis would be able to potentially have 8 years in office, and the difference that he could make with Republican priorities on that. Trump pushed back on that today.
But when I heard DeSantis go out and say, and talk about 8 years, we need 8 years. You don't need 8 years, you need 6 months. We can turn this thing around so quickly. If you need 8 years, who the hell wants to wait 8 years? You don't need 8 years.
Former President Trump says he'd do it in 6 months.
There you go, ma'am. Right, you just said urban Iowa.
Why didn't he do it his first 4 years?
Now, it's clear that this is what this is going to look like. Obviously, DeSantis has to walk a fine line when it comes to this, because he is trying to get Trump voters to vote for him and to come into his circle. But also, you're really seeing him go after Trump in a way that we had not seen before his official campaign launch last week.
And Kaitlan, you were part of the terrific reporting team, along with Paula Reed and Caitlin Plants, that broke that story about Special Counsel Jack Smith obtaining a recording of Trump discussing how he had a classified document about an attack on Iran by the U.S. that he took with him from the White House. Tell us about Trump's response today.
He's not really responding much at all. Our Jeff Zeleny tried to ask him about it. He did not answer the shouted questions from CNN in response to this reporting, didn't engage. Of course, we saw his attorney, Jim Trusty, last night talking about it publicly, but not really offering a lot of clarity about this document, about whether or not it's been returned to the National Archives or why it was taken to Bedminster in the first place. Trump did comment to the Cedar Rapids Gazette. He called the reporting fake news. Obviously, it's not just been confirmed and written by CNN, but also confirmed by other outlets. But you didn't see Trump responding to it on camera. He did make a comment today when he was speaking at that smaller event that you referenced to the investigations into him. He said he is, quote, the victim of many things. Obviously, that's how he views it. The question, though, is whether or not he has greater legal exposure following that reporting and what we now know the special counsel has in their possession.
All right, Kaitlan Collins, thanks so much. Let's discuss with my august panel, Abby Phillip. Trump is known for using derogatory nicknames for his political adversaries. He's created a litany of them, of Ron DeSantis. Today, the Florida governor responded that's part of why voters did not return him to the White House. Take a listen.
I think that's one of the reasons he's not in the White House now, because I think he alienated too many voters for things that really don't matter. So I don't care what they say about me in terms of name calling, although, you know, I would say he needs to call me a winner because we've won in Florida over and over again.
Have voters actually soured on Trump over the name calling? Is there evidence of that?
I think that what DeSantis is referring to is a different set of voters. I think the general election voters, the independents, the persuadables, the people that a Republican nominee would need to win in order to win the presidency, there is evidence, not just in the presidential election in 2020, but also in the midterms in 2018, in 2020, in the congressional races in 2020, and then also even in 2022, that voters are kind of souring on the divisiveness. They think both sides are pretty toxic. But in particular, I think Trump's toxicness was damaging to him. But when it comes to the Republican primary, that's a different set of voters that DeSantis has to contend with. And this is where it gets tough for him, because Republican primary voters, they kind of do like Trump's, kind of fighter instincts, the way that he is sort of entertaining and how he makes nicknames out of his opponents. And DeSantis is going to have to figure out, how do I deal with that? He's trying a logic argument. We'll see if that works. But I think folks need to come to terms with the fact that Trump's entertainment factor is a huge part of his appeal to Republican voters.
And former Congresswoman Mia Love, Donald Trump campaigning stood by the COVID vaccine, said a lot of people out there appreciate it. He stood by, even though a voter took him on saying that they didn't like the jab. DeSantis is aligning himself with the people who are anti-vaccine. What do you make of that?
I think DeSantis has got, he's making some choices, some good. To fight back was good. Some to fight against or attack Donald Trump on criminal justice reform. Those aren't good. Obviously, there are people who we see what the COVID vaccine has done and how many lives it saved. That's not a good thing for him to fight him on. I mean, he's making some choices, and some of those choices aren't going to work with mainstream Republicans, and he's got to get the mainstream Republicans.
Karen, more and more Republicans are teasing possible presidential runs, including Mike Pence next week. And I want to get your reaction to what New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, who is also considering running, he says about that.
Come November, December of this year, if you're not polling well, get your butt out of this race. Let's narrow it down to a couple candidates. That's more fair to the process, and I think that's going to be the discipline, not just for the candidates, but for the donor base. They have to tell their candidates to get out, right? And I think they will. This is not going to be a repeat of 2016.
So he said something similar to me, Karen, on Sunday. What do you make of that? The idea of, like, by December you need to start clearing the field.
Well, I think very few will actually do that, because the whole point is you want to get to Iowa, see how you do, and see if you can get some momentum. And given that, in a number of instances, the person who wins Iowa is not necessarily the person who ends up being the nominee. So I doubt that many will, take that advice. But clearly the concern he's trying to put forward here is that the more people who get into the race, the more fractured the vote becomes, which could create more of an opportunity for Donald Trump, which is, as you know, one of the reasons that people like former Governor Chris Christie is thinking about getting in, which the idea of someone needs to take Donald Trump on more directly, and as our own reporting indicated, not just off camera or off the stage, but on the stage, more directly challenge him. So I don't think many of the candidates or potential candidates will heed that message from Sununu, but it was a nice try.